This.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
This is the Culture Clash.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of Culture Clash here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And you might be saying, what are you doing? Where's Kevin? What's going on? We got something going on here, and it's involving one of our other great shows here on the Fandom Podcast Network, because Doctor Who is blowing up again in a big way, because we are looking at the return of one of the most famous faces of Doctor Who very soon in David Tennant. But not only that, we are looking at too soon the newest Doctor, played by Ncuti Nagawa, and who will be taking over the series after a series of specials with David Tennant. But before that, there's been a lot of hype and a lot of buzz about Doctor Who. And if I'm going to talk about Doctor Who, and then including a very special event upcoming here shortly involving Doctor Who podcasting, there's only one man to talk to. He is the expert on all things TARDIS, on all things timey, whimey, wibbly wobbly here on the Fandom Podcast Network and on the Spacebook. He, of course, is the man, the myth, the legend, the host of Type 40, Mr. Dan Hadley.
The man, the myth, the legend. Wow.
Maybe legend in his own mind. I don't know.
Just don't encourage me. Don't encourage me, everybody. Hello, Carl. Nice to see you. Nice to be back.
You are the self-proclaimed king of the geeks.
Don't you see? Everybody assumes that it's self-proclaimed. That was bestowed upon me. It was, but I haven't got time for that story now. I think we've got a lot to get stuck into, haven't we? How are you? What's been going on with you?
Well, I have yet to see the footage of the Queen Queen knighting you. So yeah, as king of the geeks,
the late Queen. Yes, she inducted me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There are other geek kings up and down the country. So Manchester's got its own, and so has London, and so has Newcastle. I think there could be in Cardiff as well.
Come on, all you British just have a royalty problem. Let's just be honest here.
We do. We like wearing crowns. Something inherent.
It's a little disturbing at times, I gotta say. but we have our jelly babies, we have our fish sticks and custard. We probably have a few other things floating around for this episode. Dan, first of all, you have been helming up Type 40 now for 5+ years here on and of course being here on the Fandom Podcast.
People keep telling me that, and it'll sink in. I'm starting to believe it. Yeah, it seems like only
it'll sink in. It sinks in every morning when you wake up and look at the mirror and realize 5 years has passed.
Yes, it's starting to show.
It's the gray hairs from podcasting. Trust me, I've learned this myself. But
they are coming in. They're definitely coming in here. Yeah, 5 years of Type 40. Yeah, 130 odd episodes, and heaven knows how many live streams and everything else that we've been doing. It's been a riot, and yeah, it's been thanks to yourself, thanks to Norman and Kevin, and thanks to the listeners too. Thanks to you.
Yeah, and of course, over the years, too, you have gathered yourself quite the group of companions on Type 40, not only with your podcast shows, but of course, you have the wonderful YouTube channel and which you do live shows on, and of course, your tie-in with your other project, the Spacebook, which you use to cover a lot more of what else is going on in fandom, especially over on your side of the pond. But
yeah, we have fun on those shows, and they're a great bunch. I'm not sure whether I'm their companion or they're mine. I think we're all one another's companions, really. It's a very happy band, and we don't always get along on those live shows on Type 40 Live, but whatever we say and whatever we differ on, we air those views in the proper spirit, I think, in which of real fandom, of what you've always said, Kyle, on this show, is respect one another and enjoy your fandom. You say that on every edition of every show that you front, and that there's something about that that's always chimed with me. And I fear I can't speak for them because they're not all here, but I'm pretty sure that Simon and Sarah and Shah and everybody else who works on the show, Ian and Charlotte and everybody on the various Type 40 shows shares that same feeling.
Well, and I think one of the things that you've done over there at Type 40, Dan, that I'm incredibly proud of, and what you do is you guys have a diverse group with different thoughts and different ideas, but you're respectful to each other. You might get into some arguments here and there, and not everybody has the same views. But you're respectful for each other, everybody having their different views, and you let everybody express their views. I mean, you don't let people go over the top, and you don't let people start throwing out like extreme
No.
hate speech and stuff like that. But if somebody doesn't like something, they're not in a position on that show to say, "Hey, I don't like this. This isn't my thing. I'm not happy with the direction of something like this is going." And you keep it an open conversation for all. And I think that's important because I think we are in a bit of a world with fandom at times where it's kind of like there's too much. You have gatekeeping going on. You have just people who, like, if you think one way, you might be wrong. They think you're wrong. And I think you've done a job of nurturing
Kyle. What you
as correct.
Oh, sorry. I think what you're pointing to is tribalism. And in one sense, that's human nature, because human beings, we are kind of pack animals, aren't we? But that doesn't mean it's something that should be indulged. And I do feel that, let people speak their mind, air their views in a way that they'll be, they may not be agreed with, but they'll be listened to and they'll be respected. And the way I view it is, if people can say largely whatever they want, particularly about the telly, about television, they should be able to talk about these things, about why they respond to the things that they do in the way that they do. And they should be able to talk about that pretty freely, because the real gold in the appreciation, I feel, of any TV show or movie is in finding the things, the way that we all receive those little things differently. We may relate to one character more than others, or we may have even, particularly when you talk about drama, we may have actually lived a version of those events that we're watching on screen, and that may give us some insight. It may give us a subjective take on it. And if we shut everybody down, or if we shut a proportion of people down who can bring their point to the table about any of that, then that's truth that we're not hearing, and that's actual human beings that we're pretty much telling to guard their tongue, shut their mouths, and go and sit in the corner whilst everybody else is speaking. I don't agree with that. I think everybody's point of view is important and should be listened to. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them.
And I found in my experience in fandom, even if you have a lot of points you don't agree on, usually at some point there is a point or two that you can agree on, and that can act as a bridge to open up the channels to have discussion. And hopefully, even if at the end of the day your discussion is you agree to disagree, but you've had an open discussion and you've listened to each other, hopefully listened to each other and learned a little bit about each other in the process. And I think that's one of the great things about fandom in general, is that it can unite people who might not have been ever talked to separately. It's that great bridge. And even but I think the most important thing is, and like you said, is as long as you respect each other's opinions. It doesn't mean you have to agree. You respect with each other's opinions, and I think you do a wonderful job over that at Type 40. Because you guys, at the end of an episode, even if you've had a heated discussion, everybody is still respectful of each other and understands that, we're all entitled to our different opinions. And I think, especially with, I was going to say, is what I think too is, especially with Doctor Who and what it's been through in, let's say, the last, I'll say 7 to 8 years and stuff, because it's really become a divisive group. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. But I do think you are coming to a moment where hopefully a lot of people can be brought, this divisiveness can be brought together again with what's about to happen in Doctor Who.
I very much believe that to be the case. I feel that, I'm not saying that when you listen to other people's views, you're gonna love a film that you if you hated Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles or something, and you talk to somebody who loved it, you're not going to feel completely differently overnight, but they may have seen something in that you didn't. And it may, the next time you catch that movie or catch that TV show, you may, I never looked at it that way. Maybe something about that will chime with you. And like I say, you may not completely revise your opinion of it, but it just might add an extra something, an extra page to the book, an extra layer to the onion, if you like. And I believe in listening to other people's views. And part of what amuses me so much is hearing the different takes. With something that's got a history that lasts 60 years, Doctor Who is 60 years old this year. Obviously, there's so many different versions of the same myth have played out during that 60 years. So you've got that too with something that's got legacy. But I think you can have that with shows that are 2-3 years old too. I think that people can view them differently. And you should listen up. You might hear something that you hadn't have imagined, that you completely missed, or something that does completely change your opinion of whatever it is you've been watching.
I agree with you, and I think it's very interesting. You said it yourself, Dan. We're coming up on the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. 60 years of Doctor Who. Not many TV franchises can say they've run over that length of time, and even with some big gaps in it. But I think it's very interesting to talk about Doctor Who, especially. And I know you on Type 40, you get it from your local area standpoint and a standpoint from a lot of areas over in Europe and
we try
that area with some US input now and then. But Doctor Who in the US is it's very interesting because Doctor Who got so huge in the US during the David Tennant run. It started to pick people kind of were getting interested in it with Eccleston, and then Eccleston left, Tennant came in, and of course written by Russell T Davies. The entire run of the 10th Doctor became huge in the US. And
where was it screening when David Tennant and Matt Smith and when David Tennant and Chris Eccleston were doing it? Where was it screening in America?
That would be on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was on Friday nights on the Sci-Fi Channel, and then it moved to BBC America when BBC America got formed, and that's where you kind of really wrote out a lot of kind of the end of the Tennant era, but pretty much the entire Matt Smith era up until now has been on BBC America. And obviously Matt Smith, incredibly popular run as Doctor Who in the US. Then when it switched to Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor, it kind of went in a different direction. I think a lot of people at the time, Stephen Moffat was the writer through Matt Smith's run, and he wrote through the Capaldi run. But a lot of people, I think, especially here in the US, felt like maybe Moffat should have left when Matt Smith left, and that maybe we should have had a new writer then. And I think there's a lot of the aspects of the 11th run that hung on a little too long into Peter Capaldi's run, because at least here in the US, the Doctor Who fans who stayed with Doctor Who really feel like Capaldi's last season, when they finally had a change up in companions, as well as introducing the character of Missy, who I understand has her own controversy, but a lot of people like the actress who was playing that and thought she played that character very well. Then we had, of course, and it was a big deal when it first was announced, of Jodie Whittaker becoming the first female Doctor. And of course, she made that amazing appearance at San Diego Comic-Con and had a lot of people talking. Chris Chibnall took over as the writer. And to say that it was a bumpy road from the after San Diego Comic-Con and through Jodie Whittaker's run would be being nice. So let's put it that way. There's a lot of stuff within that we don't need to go into on this show. I think most people out there know it, but Doctor Who is definitely taking a major dive in the United States. However, it's coming up on the 60th anniversary, and a lot has happened with Doctor Who in the last, fair to say, the last year and a half, Dan. Obviously, it's kind of been timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly as we're traveling back a little bit in time with Doctor Who, as Russell T Davies is coming back with Bad Wolf as the showrunners, and they are bringing back David Tennant for the 60th anniversary specials that they are going to run, which will lead into, of course, the 15th Doctor, which will be played by Ncuti Nagawa. And the other big aspect of this is now Disney Plus is going to be the home of Doctor Who worldwide outside of the United Kingdom. And so I think it's going to have a bigger profile again. I think a lot of people are very interested with Tennant coming back, and I think people are actually at least intrigued of what having Russell back, Ncuti Nagawa as a Doctor. He's made a lot of appearances, and I think he's made more appearances than either Peter Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker made as the Doctor.
He has been getting around a lot, hasn't he? I mean, I'm very excited by the idea of Ncuti Nagawa playing the Doctor. I've never seen him act, so he's a completely unknown quantity to me. But I do get sort of wary of actors before they make a debut in a role being out there a little bit too much, because they become celebrities, don't they? And then it becomes a little harder to see them just as the character that they're supposed to be playing. You start to think, oh, that's David or that's Matt. It's, you start to refer to them by their Christian names rather than as the Doctor, because it should always be the Doctor. And I want Ncuti Nagawa to be the Doctor. I want him to be my hero. I want him to be your hero and your hero. Everybody's, so I want everybody to see that character that they've grown up with in this man as he connects with the role. And of course, the other side of that coin being for the new people who have never seen it before, particularly the children, they're going to meet their doctor, and Ncuti Gatwa will be their doctor throughout their lives. You know, that's what the baton that you want to see passed on.
So let me ask you this, because I Ncuti Gatwa, his out in public and appearances for Doctor Who have definitely increased in the last few months as we get closer to these anniversary specials coming out. And I'll tell anybody, go listen to Type 40. They've been talking about every piece of news as it comes out. You guys have done a phenomenal job in covering this.
We've tried.
Let me ask you though, because I was thinking about this the other day, Dan, with Ncuti, and people are trying to get a read on what his Doctor is going to be all about based off of his appearances. I truly believe in his appearances, you might be seeing more of Ncuti, how he is as a person. You're not seeing how he is as the Doctor. I think that's being kept under wraps until we really get the premiere of the show. And I know that we've already seen some things that have some diehard Doctor Who fans, I don't want to say hating on it, but I think they're on guard more. And so my question for you is twofold. Obviously, a lot of that on guard is after everything that went through with this last iteration with Chris Chibnall, because Chris Chibnall did a lot of things just affecting the canon of Doctor Who that did not go over well. Obviously, you have Russell T Davies coming back, which a lot of people are I'm getting, most people are hopeful. There's some people out there who have their own reservations about Russell T Davies.
Generally speaking, I think that's fair, yeah.
With Ncuti, I think one of the things that I've noticed, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is a lot of people are, because the Doctor always has a look to him. And Ncuti's been seen in a lot of pictures on set in many different outfits. And I'm gonna say this. I'm not jumping to conclusions, but I think part of what's going to be happening with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, at least initially, is we're actually, for the first time, it's not going to be just in an episode. It might be through the season that the Doctor is kind of rediscovering himself.
Perhaps
after this change, and it could be affected because it is David Tennant. It's the 14th Doctor is using the 10th Doctor's face, so there could be a little bit of an identity crisis going on here with the Doctor.
Given the fact that, I mean, we don't know. There's 8 episodes in the new season of Doctor Who, 9 if you include the Christmas special, where we're going to see Ncuti Gatwa. Well, we're certainly going to be in his era for the first time. We don't know who else is writing any of this other than Russell T Davies, so we still know very little. But obviously, anybody who remembers the original Russell T Davies run will remember how he did favour, he championed and brought through the idea within Doctor Who of a story arc, which I suppose J. Michael Straczynski had really pioneered on Babylon 5. Joss Whedon had also used it very effectively on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Russell had watched both of those shows, realised that it was something that Doctor Who could probably be fueled by, and that the audiences could be reached with. And the question is, will he still be doing that for Series 14? Will there be some sort of arc? And I believe that there will be. But the more I think about it, I don't think it will be as literal as others have been. It may well be, just as you said, simply one that the central character goes on. And particularly as there's only those 8 episodes in one straight run, it's very difficult to pull off something effectively like that with so few episodes. So yeah, perhaps they will. Perhaps this will be a restatement of who the Doctor is, what his values are, the choices that he makes, and the things that he does, and the way in which other peoples throughout the universe, other civilizations, are affected by coming into contact with him, I suppose. Yeah, this really is. It feels like a fresh slate in many respects.
Yeah, that was the other question I was going to ask you, Dan, because I remember when Eccleston came in, and then we had the long break. The last thing we had was that Fox US special of the Doctor, where we had our 8th Doctor, and then Eccleston comes in the 9th after, what was it? Was it about 10 years?
It was 9 years in between actually coming on screen. Yeah, between Paul McGann and Chris Eccleston. 9 years.
Yeah, so that's a big gap. But this reincarnation, even more so than when Jodie took over after Peter Capaldi, and we had to change in showrunners and everything like that. I know that the BBC was really kind of hoping that would be kind of a relaunch and a new direction and feel for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And while I'm not going to sit here and badmouth, I'm going to say probably with the majority of people, it just didn't catch for a multitude of reasons. And again, I'm not going to
people believe it was just one reason, or one of two reasons, but there was a lot of reasons why it didn't work. Yeah.
But I do sense an issue of renewed hope here. And I also sense too, Dan, that Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf, who are really the showrunners behind Doctor Who, and especially now with the Disney Plus being the distributor, it does feel like they're marketing towards a more global audience and not just local audience. Have you guys in your discussions at Type 40 and just how you've seen it in your area, does it feel like that coming from your end?
No. Despite what I've just said, no, it doesn't, because, and I'll tell you for why, because from our perspective, all we are seeing is British actors, most of which, for the most part, we do have a couple of international, I mean, Neil Patrick Harris being the most prominent example, but there's Jonathan Groff and Jinx Monsoon are also involved, who I understand are big names in the States, but to us, they're not, you see. So to our eyes, we have a few British actors, a couple of which we know from soaps. You know, Millie Gibson, who's playing the new companion. Lots of people who watched the soap that she was on have watched her grow up because they watched her in that soap opera. So to us, it's actors we've seen in other stuff, running around Cardiff and Bristol and all these places, being chased by guys in rubber suits. So it's kind of like business as usual to us. But I think and so there are some people out there that are therefore reading that as if to say RTD2, the second coming of Russell T Davies, is going to be a complete retread of his original tenure. I don't think that'll be the case at all. I think, they stopped filming it around 3 weeks ago now. We're not going to see those episodes until March. That's a long time in post-production. By the standards of the show when it was on in the noughties when Russell was running it before. So I would say that, that firstly there's all the stuff that we haven't seen that was made in the studio, and Bad Wolf have a facility that dwarfs anything the BBC have in their resources. It's more in line with the resources that are at the disposal of something like Amazon or Netflix. It's global. It's the world stage. But that extra time in post production as well will mean that the effects should be certainly leagues ahead of anything that's been on Doctor Who before, and hopefully stand up with anything that the likes of the MCU or Lucasfilm, it should stand up next to them as well. It'll just have people like Bonnie Langford in it.
Well, I just want to throw out, if you haven't watched Secret Invasion, you might want to rethink your thinking about it being at MCU standards right now.
Oh, okay. That was it.
There's some bad CGI in that final episode of Secret Invasion. But
you see what I'm saying? I think you're right. I think there's so much that's coming our way in every respect. And that makes people nervous. And some people want to be reassured that it's going to still be the show they recognize, whereas other people hunger for the show to go next level. I prefer to be. I'm quite a cozy person. I'm very much a creature of habit, but I prefer to be the guy who's looking forward rather than always looking back. Although I do enjoy looking back. Of course I do.
Well, I think there's something very interesting that's developed because of the situation in the U.S. entertainment market right now, with the writer strike going on and with the actor strike going on. Doctor Who might have a really big advantage of being one of those big franchises that's debuting with nothing around it now, because things are already starting to get pushed back. Luckily, you have a lot of British actors in this that aren't affected by the strike because they can work, and because you're filming for us overseas. And so Doctor Who's it's like House of Dragon. House of Dragon is season 2 is currently filming because they don't use American actors for the majority of that.
Well, I know it might sound awful because of course I've got sympathy for the people who are striking. Everybody's got a right to strike, but I'm quite relieved because House of the Dragon, I thought that's the best thing that was on TV last year. So I'd like some more of that as soon as possible, please. Thank you, HBO.
Yeah, well, and you want to get Matt Smith before he might jump on the MCU train too. So that's a whole other discussion.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, it could be
in more ways than one.
But hey, wait for it. That role could be a bit of a stretch for him. I know.
But
You can cut that bit.
no, we're gonna leave that in. Yeah, come on now, we're gonna have fun here. But two with the other thing. So we have the 60th anniversary coming up, and I think
Yes.
the biggest deal of that, as big as Russell T Davies coming back to Doctor Who has been for a lot of people, I think internationally, the return yet again of David Tennant to Doctor Who. Obviously, the last time we saw him was the specials with Matt Smith, and David Tennant, as popular as Matt Smith is, as popular as other doctors are, I think it's fair to say he is the most popular and most worldwide recognized doctor of all time. Maybe, maybe Tom Baker. Maybe Tom Baker
too. Him and Tom, like yeah. That. Yeah, it's David Tennant is. I mean, certainly.
Because I would say Matt Smith is just a notch below.
People do love Matt Smith in Great Britain as well, but David Tennant is practically he is adored on a level.
He's a legend. He's just Good Omens season 2 has just come out on Amazon with him and Michael Sheen. I mean, and Tennant here, well known not only for playing the Doctor, his role in Jessica Jones. I know his role in Broadchurch was popular here in the United States as well, and he's done a lot. And I know that he just won recently a Lifetime Achievement Award from one of your recognized from one of the organizations there where you're at. Yeah. But how big of a deal is it? Are you hearing from your constituents and the people who are involved, Doctor Who fans, that Tennant is coming back? Does it seem to be pretty much a universal excitement and acceptance that he's coming back? Or are there people who are still kind of like, is this the right idea? We're not sure.
It's not been universally well received, but the majority of people are either very happy to see him back because either he was their favorite Doctor before, so yeah, I'll have some more of that, thank you very much, or they like him as an actor. He's got, not only has he got a very strong work ethic, that man is always working, but he has a very, very high hit rate for delivering quality performances. He never appears to be off his game. And David Tennant is the kind of actor where you can put him in a series where the material might be actually quite mediocre, but he will bring something that does sort of polish it up and make it, if not compelling, then certainly more watchable. He just has something about him that everybody seems to respond to. But if you don't fall into any of those camps, there are a lot of people as well who just want to see Doctor Who back on track, back on the rails, and know in a very pragmatic way that if you want to get Doctor Who back on the rails as quickly as possible and heading in the right direction, then bringing back the guy who is, as we've said, the most successful bloke to play the part, or certainly who could still run down a corridor at any rate, to bring him back would be the most sensible idea at a time where we should be celebrating the show rather than biting our nails and wondering whether it's going to make it through the next 18 months or not. There's something about the way that Tennant plays it which really does, and this is the way that he differs from what Tom Baker did back in the 70s, because Tom was Tom and nobody played it quite like Tom before or since. David Tennant, he is a distinctive actor and he is distinctive as the Doctor, but there is something quintessential about him not just as regards the Doctor, but as regards a screen hero. He looks like a leading man. He's a very, very powerful performance. He's a very physical actor and a very layered performer. And so this show is back in the right hands before it can start making more, not necessarily brave choices, because Ncuti Gatwa, okay, he didn't lead Sex Education, but it can't be argued he seems to have been a very important component part in its success. But obviously him stepping into a leading role, so much will fall on that young man's shoulders. It is brave to take that on. And yeah, an actor like that, he'd be mad to turn it down. I'm not saying he should have done by any stretch, but even so, he will be, and his representatives will be there wishing him to succeed, because obviously it's not always a given. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 years? Who knows how long he'll be playing the part? But I think that anybody who's remotely invested in the brand and has any sort of residual warmth in them for the series from when they were growing up will feel that all's right with the TV world as long as Doctor Who is still being made and is still on, where people can find it and where you can sit down with your kids and be taken off somewhere for 45 minutes, escape into time and space on some wild adventure with an eccentric man in a blue box. I think it's not much to ask on a Saturday night, at any rate.
I agree. I agree so much with what you said there. One of the other aspects of it too, that is my personal opinion too, by bringing Tennant back, I think it makes it a much easier transition to Ncuti
Far
as
easier.
the next Doctor. It's a much better handing off torch, going from a Doctor who was polarizing, well, to put it that way, in having that torch hand off to Ncuti, compared to bringing in Tennant, who was going to bring in a lot of old fans who maybe had checked out on Doctor Who because it's David Tennant and they want to see what they're going to do. It also helps, I think, too, that it appears that they are going to be addressing one of the biggest, maybe probably the biggest dangling plot line from David Tennant's run. And of course, Catherine Tate returning as Donna Noble in these specials, at least one of these specials as well.
Yeah, she's in all three. Yeah,
is she in all three? Okay, I wasn't 100% sure about that.
Yeah.
So to have Donna Noble back, which most people, if it's love either the Doctor and Rose because of the romantic, or they love the Doctor and Donna because they're best friends and everybody. And Donna Noble is one of the most well-written companions that they've done in the modern era. I think it's a great way to get the audience back interested in Doctor Who, and then try to keep them on when Ncuti takes over as the new Doctor.
When you think about it, Kyle, if they'd have decided not to get Tennant back, and maybe have done a similar thing, but with another relatively high-profile actor, and put them in the role for a set of specials, they would have been making a rod for their own back, really, because if an actor like Hugh Grant, for example, or even somebody who wasn't British, just somebody with a bigger profile, a bankable name, because if they'd have succeeded in the role, there would have always been an appetite to say, oh, well, 3 episodes isn't enough. It's, we've really got to lose them when we're just getting to know them. This way, it really does feel like a handing over of the torch. Yeah.
Now, I will say this too: when it was announced that Doctor Who Ncuti got the role of Doctor Who, he was filming the movie Barbie at the time. And yeah. When it was found out, Ryan Gosling stopped production to announce it to the entire cast, who just went bonkers that he got the role. So he's got
I didn't know that.
Ncuti has got quite the following within his peers. He's highly regarded. So I'm very curious to see how he's going to be with his role of Doctor Who.
If he's half as likable in real life, in the workplace, as he is just following him on social media, I think he seems to have a very infectious personality. Then I can believe it.
Yeah. The other thing too, Dan, you tell me, it seems like he has really shown a lot of respect for the Doctor Who property for the most part since he's been cast in the role.
That's how I read it. Yeah. There are lots of people out there who let me rephrase that. There's a proportion of people out there who feel that an actor who takes this role should go back and watch literally every episode ever made. I think that could be a touch unreasonable, but I think it's important that they reach the character, understand the character, and connect with it in some way. And from what I'm reading, Ncuti hasn't given that many proper interviews. I think there's been 2. One with Vogue, I think it was, and then another with the Rolling Stone. The one in particular with Rolling Stone, where they actually took the time to ask him about his craft. The Vogue piece, because it was a special. The Vogue piece, it was for Pride Month, and so they talked a lot about people's personal lives and about their personalities and things like that. But the Rolling Stone one was much more about his craft, and he explained, not at great length in that, but certainly to enough depth to satisfy any doubts that I had, that he had been watching old stuff and could recognize the character, was teasing what he felt connects him to the Doctor, and sort of pointing to the kind of performance that he may give us without actually spoiling anything. I'd recommend anybody track down Rolling Stone. The full article is up on their website too. You don't have to actually buy the print copy to read it. It's a really nice interview, and he says a lot of things. There are some things that he says in there which got people go, didn't sound too good, but you've got to take the rough with the smooth, and sometimes the printed word doesn't come across the way that it's intended, does it? The things that I choose to focus on are when this man is talking about his craft and how he describes the Doctor. Yeah, it may not be how everybody's played it, but it is absolutely the same character I've been watching all my life. I've got every faith in him, certainly in Ncuti, based on that.
Well, and kind of the last thing on Ncuti and what with the changes coming, to me too, one of the biggest things that stood out as far as Ncuti getting recognition was there was that moment. I guess it was probably maybe about 4 to 6 months ago. Peter Capaldi, while he's on stage, recognized Ncuti Gatwa.
Yeah,
and gave him very high praise and gave him some basically his endorsement in front of a group of their peers, and how respectful Ncuti was back to Peter Capaldi. To me, that was a moment that said, okay, this guy's gotten the stamp.
And there's some
because I don't remember
photographs out there.
Yeah, I don't remember that many. I mean, and I understand part of it was COVID was going on, but I don't remember any of the other previous Doctors. I know Tennant did later on, but when Jodie Whittaker was first brought in as the Doctor, it really felt like the other actors who played the Doctor really didn't make comments like they have about Ncuti playing the Doctor.
I don't know. I think there were a lot of quotes in the press at the time in the media, and I'm pretty sure there were quotes from practically everybody who'd played the part before, with the exception of Chris Eccleston, and he'd commented on it. He has commented on it since. But with Ncuti, yeah, there probably has been. I think it's been about the same, but in this respect, I just think that it's been embraced a little more. When Chris Chibnall and his production team were running that show, they seemed to want a very clear divide between what had come before and what they were doing, both narratively and as regards the publicity. They were treating it as an entirely different production. And I can sort of see why, because it had been on for quite a long time. And it could, I suppose they were trying to sell it as something new and not stale. So I appreciate when you're talking about a legacy show, it's difficult. But they annexed it to such a degree, and they didn't own those quotes in the way that they have been in the last year. I don't know whether this is the timing of it being the anniversary or the build-up to an anniversary, or if it's simply the fact that Russell T Davies understands publicity a lot better than Chris Chibnall did. And more to the point, it's not that he understands it. He's not frightened of it. And I think Chris Chibnall was. I think he found it a threat to that which he was trying to achieve. Which, at the very least, I think no matter how you feel about his material, I think he's gone on record several times as saying that secrecy was very important to Chris Chibnall. He felt that very, very, very important. And maybe he was trying to cultivate an air of mystique around the whole show in keeping what was going on currently separate. But in my view, that was a mistake. And Russell T Davies can sometimes come across as a bit of a windbag, a bit like me when I'm rambling on like this. But Russell T Davies can come across as a bit of a windbag. But he really does understand publicity, and he knows how the British public certainly feel about this show. With Bad Wolf also in his corner, and with Sony and Disney Plus too working on this, I'd like to think that ear for what the British public want to hear and how they want to feel, that will be amplified to make the world feel similarly, at least, or as much as they can.
I think that's some good points that you bring up, Dan, and I'm really excited for what is going to be happening with Doctor Who. But there's other things. It is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, which means events, and there's an event that you have been part, from what I gathered and from what you've told me, you've at least been a part of and bringing to life. And that is an event that's going to be happening just a couple of days after this podcast comes out. That's going to be August 9th, Doctor Who Podcasting Day. Yeah. Now, can you tell us a little bit about Doctor Who Podcasting Day? Because I have seen some pics on the Type 40 page of some pretty interesting people backing Doctor Who Type 40, Doctor Who Podcasting Day. And I know that there's a lot of Doctor Who podcasts who are getting themselves involved in this. What is it about, and what role did you have to play in it?
Well, it's very, first of all, what's it about? It's very, very simple. It is what it says on the tin. Doctor Who Podcast Day. So it's hashtag DWPD. And the idea is that it's simply one day of the year where not just people, content creators and podcasters, but the listeners too can all come together in a sense of community and celebrate Doctor Who podcasts, why we listen to them, why we like them, why we make them, and everything surrounding them, really. So it's a celebration of the community, a celebration of creativity, and also there's a spirit too of what next, of looking forward, speculation, which is what Doctor Who fans do best, is to speculate about the future. So to speculate not just about what's coming on the show, but about where podcasting and Doctor Who podcasting, where that could go in the future too. So it's really quite a simple premise, a simple conceit. It's not necessarily an original one. It's just like, like the Star Wars Day, and there's Alien Day, and there's all these other days. There's also a Star Wars Podcast Day, and all manner of things like that. So Doctor Who Podcast Day, even though I haven't really been speaking about this publicly, it was something that I came up with this idea. I pitched it to somebody who I felt was could be receptive to the idea. And together we've sort of pulled resources and whispered in a few ears, and we're going to see if we can make something happen, something cozy, and something creative, and something with that sense of community for August the 9th. And that's why it's August the 9th, you see, because the very first podcast, the very first Doctor Who podcast ever was Doctor Who Podshock. And that dropped its very first episode on August the 9th of 2005. And it's a show that ran for years and years and years and years. In fact, I don't think it's actually officially ended. I think the guys have just been on an extended break for about 5 years. They may come back, I don't know. But I felt that the most appropriate day to pin Doctor Who Podcast Day on would be the exact date that very first Doctor Who podcast was published on. So this is kind of tribute to them too, as everybody else, the dozens, if not hundreds of other Doctor Who podcasters all over the world, so take that baton and run with it in various different directions. But we all do a similar thing, but in our own ways. And again, that's something else I wanted to celebrate with this too.
Well, then let me ask you this, because there's a lot of wonderful Doctor Who podcasts out there. Of course, I'm maybe a little biased when it comes to Type 40, but for my involvement in the creation of Type 40, and again,
quite rightly so,
Dan has turned Type 40 into something well beyond what the initial vision here was with myself and Norman Lau. And we might have put the paper to the pen to get the idea started, but Dan is the heart of Type 40 and has grown it leaps and bounds. So I can say this in all confidence. When you listen to an episode of Type 40, you are listening to a man host that show that is doing it from a true passion and a place of love for Doctor Who and what he's talking about. And that's what makes that show so magical. But Dan, there are a lot of other great Doctor Who podcasts out there. I don't know if you are able to divulge or not, but can you name some of the other podcasts that you know of that might be taking part in Type?
Well, I do. Can I name some of them? I'm not entirely sure at this moment in time exactly who's confirmed, but we are going to be doing some sort of live event on Tuesday, the day before Podcasting Day. The idea is we'll have a round table discussion with lots of different content creators, so that could happen too. But I'd say at the moment, there are at least 30, coming up to 40 Doctor Who podcasts that are involved in this, or certainly that have signaled an interest. And I've said, yes, we are going to drop an episode on that day. We're going to use all the hashtags. And so hopefully Twitter and Instagram will be filled with Doctor Who podcasts that day, all of them with attached to that hashtag DWPD. So that's the dream. That's the simple dream. So no stunts or anything like that. Just simple, great material, good conversations out there, a wealth of choice for the listener, and a chance for some of us to communicate with one another, even if it's in a very sort of subspace way. And some of us are getting together to have a bit of a round table about it all. And so stay tuned, keep watching the social medias for that too, at Doctor Who Podcast Day on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook there.
Okay, so let me ask you. You're talking about a roundtable. Is that going to be something you're going to put out as a live show, or it's still in the
Yes,
works?
he says confidently. Yes, it's very much in the. It's kind of like it's kind of like one of the telethons they do, in the sense that people have said they're going to do it. So who will turn up or not? I will have to wait and see. But I'll certainly be there. I'm pretty sure Ken Deep is going to be there, one of the original Doctor Who podcasters. And I've got signals of interest from various people who, if you do listen to Doctor Who podcasts, I'm sure that you'll have heard of one or two of them. Even if you have no idea who the hell I am, you will definitely have heard them and recognize their voices. And this is where you'll get to see and hear people interacting about and talking about Doctor Who podcasting and Doctor Who itself. And maybe even taking some questions too. So we're going to see how it all works out. Keep your fingers crossed for me, everybody. I'm sure it'll be fine.
So would it be safe to say, to tell people who are watching or listening to this, that maybe pay attention to the Type 40 Doctor Who YouTube channel?
Yeah, get over there too, and yeah, make sure you subscribe to Type 40 on YouTube. Yeah, so go over there, subscribe, click the cloister bell to get the notifications, and things could pop up there too. And there's various social media, so you come and find us there.
Well, and of course, too, people can find the main Type 40 show also here on the master feed of the Fandom Podcast Network. But make sure you subscribe either to the YouTube channel for Type 40 or its own feed, Type 40, because there's a lot of content that's exclusive to those channels that is absolutely wonderful content and wonderful conversations that you have. But, I'm just going to throw this out there to you too, Dan, on your episodes. Please tell either Charlotte, because you have two Charlottes on your within your to quit reprogramming K9.
Yes, both Charlottes are incorrigible. They are. I'll do my best, but I can't promise they'll listen to me.
Yeah, the last time I went to go give K9 a treat, he was a little snippy. I don't know what happened. He insisted only on jelly babies. I don't know. It was
they spoil him.
Yeah, that's what it is. They think he's too cute. That's really what
you could be
is.
right.
But I know it's a very exciting time for Doctor Who. When is the first special? What is the air date for the first special, Dan? Do we have an official date?
We don't know. We still don't know what's going on. It's just how long is it? It's now August. So it's September, October, November. This is 3 and a bit months away. I think we can safely say that the earliest it will be on, the first one will be midway through November.
That's what I'm hearing. It's November.
Yeah, the very, very latest that we're going to see new stuff will be the 23rd of November, 2023, because they're not going to leave it any later than the 60th anniversary itself. No idea. Well, I suppose this is something that you might be able to shed light on, really, because what is feasible? I would imagine this will have to be day and date all over the world. Otherwise, having an international streaming home, it's going to be meaningless, isn't it? So I'd sort of taken it. Most Doctor Who fans, I think, their ideal scenario is one episode a week on the same night of the week. But I don't know. I think consecutive nights is a possibility because there's only 3 of them, and they could put them all out in a week then, or it could be like successive Saturdays, or some other pattern. What do you think is feasible with Disney Plus?
Well, okay, so this is a question. I think that one of the questions that hasn't, to my knowledge, been answered yet because of the uniqueness of this situation where Doctor Who is airing normal time on BBC. It's not a stream. It's not on a streamer. Where
That's right.
The rest of the world it is. So is the deal where it's going to air on BBC first, because it's a BBC property basically, and then after it airs, it will pop up on streaming across the world? That is kind of what I'm thinking is the approach that they're going to take. That's kind of a lot of American TV shows that also come out digitally. They'll air first on the network, and by the next day they're out on the streamer or shortly thereafter.
Because, for example, when Star Wars Ahsoka drops episode 1 on August the 29th, for example, it's usually the entire world, and it goes live at 1 minute past midnight on the actual day, doesn't it?
Usually it's a couple hours afterward. Usually it's usually right around midnight Pacific Coast time, because that's in the US. That's the latest midnight.
I thought so, because that simply won't be possible with Doctor Who. Otherwise, you'd have people in America, in Australia, Canada, anywhere else in the world who'd be able to watch this episode hours before people in Britain, which will completely not just spoil the viewing experience, but will spoil the sense of occasion as well. So I don't know what they would have agreed to. I would imagine, because obviously, BBC One, for people who don't know, people overseas, people in the States, BBC One is strictly just analog television, so it's just like NBC or ABC, and it'll go out completely like that, and then as soon as it's screened, it will be put on the iPlayer, which is a kind of like a Netflix kind of service that's specific to the BBC, where people will be able to watch it over and over and over again. So I don't know. Will Disney Plus drop the episode? For example, if it screens on BBC at 7 p.m. on a Saturday night, will Disney drop it?
I think it's 7:01 p.m. It drops on Disney Plus.
Because impatient people could scroll to the end of the episode on Disney Plus, couldn't they? And then put the spoilers on Twitter and go, "Oh, look what happens at the end of this." And in Britain, they're 20 minutes in.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
That's one of the interesting questions that's still out there. I'm very intrigued to see how that's going to.
Has this been done before, Kyle? Has this been done before, where there's been a global profile show that in the streaming age that has had this peculiar setup where one territory gets it in a different form, but at the same time, it seems like uncharted ground to me.
The closest thing I can think of, but it's still all the same network, is when HBO had with their streaming service. Like, what they will do is they still have their network, regular television. So, like, let's just say a new episode of Game of Thrones or The Last of Us would drop, and it would drop when it would air worldwide, no matter what the time zone was at that set time, and then it would also drop on the streamer at that set time. So you can watch it either via stream, but with HBO, you're not dealing with commercials or anything like that. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's one of the more interesting questions with Doctor Who and how this is going to play out. I think there's still a lot to be answered. In the meantime, I know people are selling their 14th Doctor Sonic screwdrivers on eBay for insane amounts right now.
Yeah, I can see it's tempting. I've got mine. It's still in its box.
So they might be able to fund a whole new season of Doctor Who just based off the sales of those Sonic screwdrivers. But
it could be.
It is definitely an exciting time. I think it really does feel like this is a real, true new beginning for Doctor Who. And what I mean by that is not a reset, but just a reintroduction to the Doctor Who internationally. And I think having David Tennant return is going to be huge. I think Ncuti is in a position, can be put in every position to succeed as Doctor Who, from the marketing and the backing he's going to have with him, and just being able to work with somebody who knows Doctor Who so well, and Russell T Davies, that I think it's going to make for a Doctor Who that maybe has ties to the classic, but I think we're going to see some new things with Doctor Who as well. And I think I think everybody needs to be prepared to see a Doctor unlike any Doctor we've ever seen before.
In my view, the thing, and you can say what you like about the last 4 or 5 years of Doctor Who history, but I think people who enjoyed it, and there are some out there who enjoyed it, people who enjoyed it and the people who didn't wouldn't be able to argue with the fact that now, for the best part of 5 years, no one has been talking about Doctor Who in Britain or abroad. And that's a bad thing, because it means that people didn't care anymore. And whereas here, now, the task at hand is to remind people why they love this show so much, why they latched onto that character. I think Russell T Davies, whatever we think of Russell T Davies, whether we've enjoyed his other work or not, whether we agree with him politically about various matters or not, he knows how to get people talking. He knows how to get people punching the air. He knows how to get us shedding a tear, only too well. And this is going to be television. This is going to be television that hits people, that compels you to watch more. That can't be argued. As regards the future, it's up to Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson to capitalise on the fact that certainly in Britain, the British public do want to watch this show. They want to know that it's there, but generally speaking, there's such a wealth of affection for it whenever you grew up watching it. To turn people off to that is no mean feat. So you have to you don't have to give people reasons to watch it so much as give people reasons not to. So I think that realistically, everything if it all works in November, because we haven't seen, I keep having to tell myself, we haven't seen these specials yet. If it all works as planned in November, then Shooty and Millie and everybody who's going to be on the production from Series 14 onwards will be best placed to deliver a show that doesn't just remind people why they liked it before, but just makes it absolutely essential for anybody who just catches a single episode to them to turn to their partner or their kids or whoever else is in their vicinity and say, okay, we must watch that next week, to compel people to be there each and every time. Doctor Who used to have that, had it for a very long time. I believe it can have it again. I have every faith in Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson in particular.
I'm very excited for their role and to see what they do. But I got one last question, just a little fun before we close up this culture clash, Dan. Because, there's everybody always has their opinions. Oh, I'd like to see this person as the Doctor. I want to see this person as the Doctor.
No.
I have come to a conclusion. There is one person who is currently out there who I would love to see get a turn as the Doctor. And that is the wonderful and talented Olivia Colman. I think she would make it fun.
You think she's still game for it? She'd still be okay?
After watching Secret Invasion, where she was definitely the highlight of Secret Invasion, and how she played the character of Sonya Falsworth in Secret Invasion, I could see her playing the Doctor very easily and having a lot of fun with the character. Maybe she only does it for a season or something like that, but I would love to see her get behind the TARDIS. And really, I think she's just cheeky enough. I think she's got that energy to her, and I think she's got that keep you on your toes kind of thing, because she's such a chameleon and such an amazing actress that I really think she could bring something to the Doctor in that we didn't get the first time around when they tried certain things with the Doctor. And I think she would bring a great energy. But I got to ask you, Dan, what about you? Is there somebody out there right now that, not to knock down Shooty or anything like that, but is there somebody that would be kind of your dream Doctor right now, or it's like, oh man, if this person was put in the role of the Doctor, I'm 100% in, my excitement level is through the roof?
Gosh, it's such a simple question. It's one I've been asked many, many times over the years, but I haven't been asked it for a while. So much has changed in recent past. I haven't really thought about this much for the last 18 months because, we've got two Doctors ready in the barrel, we haven't seen yet. No, for a long time, the name that I wanted was Sacha Dhawan, who ended up playing the Master.
And he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal as the Master in his run as the Master.
I still think he'd have been awesome, and he was decent enough as the Master. But obviously, the Master's a different kind of character in many respects. So who? Oh God, who have I seen recently? Probably the guy from, I don't even know his name. I recently watched Daisy Jones and the Six on Amazon Prime. Have you seen that? Did you watch that?
I have not seen that yet. But
there's the guy who plays the lead in that, who plays Billy Dunn, Jason something or other. He's fantastic in that. I didn't realize I watched the entire thing. 10 episodes of Daisy Jones and the Six, and I had no idea that guy was English. No idea. But if he can convince me that he's this sort of hard drinking rock star in that show, but he's really quite a posh lad from, I think it was Chester, somewhere like that, then whoever he is, Billy Dunn from Daisy Jones and the Six, that's
now I could say something that would get me in trouble with all the UK listeners. What if the next Doctor was Australian?
Was Australian? Oh. It has been talked about before. Who would I pick if it was somebody who was Australian? I don't know. Obviously, you could think of Hugh Jackman, but I think Hugh's knocking on a bit now. I think he's a bit too old to be taking on a job like that. I don't know. You have to ask me that one again.
There's probably another Hemsworth out there that we can find for the role.
Yeah, somebody called Chris. Yeah, there's lots of Chris's about, aren't there?
Yeah, he might be a little too busy with Netflix movies right now. But
Ray, if any Australians watching, I think Ray Mayer from Home and Away, who plays Alf Stewart, I think that get him as the Doctor. That'd be fun.
The riots in the UK are already starting. I can feel it bubbling as we go.
Yeah, ask Lethal Mullet that one. I have to get him back on.
Yeah. Or you're, of course, isn't one of your major contributors also from Australia?
Oh, he is. Yeah, I haven't asked him actually. Matt Pott. Yeah, he's in Tasmania. I'll have to ask him if he was to cast an Aussie Doctor at the moment, who would it be? Because there are some great Aussie actors out there, and I'm not very precious about it as regards international actors playing Doctor Who. To be truthful, even though I said I didn't realise that guy was British, I don't mind Australians or Americans playing it. I think it's quite possible, quite feasible. Yeah, controversial take.
Well, with that, Dan, I'm going to close up this episode of Culture Clash. Very excited for Doctor Who Podcasting Day, August 9th.
So am I.
Lots of things going on there. The 60th anniversary is upon us. Dan, where can people find you and Type 40 out there?
Okay, where should we start? We can find Type 40 at its dedicated home feed, type40.podbean.com. That's where you can find all the episodes of Type 40 itself, their reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists and some pretty awesome guests. Something for every fan over at type40.podbean.com. And as well as the podcast there, you can get every episode too in video form on the Type 40 YouTube and Rumble channels now, so you can go and get us in video form completely, well, mostly raw, with as little editing as possible over there. Yeah, find us on YouTube too. Where else? There's the social medias as well, on Instagram and Twitter at Type 40 Doctor Who. So that's the best place to get all things Type 40 as the countdown to the 60th anniversary event continues, and 2 whole new Doctors. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. Come and find us at Type 40 on YouTube and everywhere else there on the podcatcher of your choice.
And just to keep Dan out of trouble, I'm going to give a shout out to Ian, Simon, Charlotte, and Sarah, and all the other great contributors to Type 40. Companions, you've been recognized.
Yeah, they're a wonderful bunch, and we have some great conversations there. And as we said at the top of the show, I think that although there's lots that we all agree on, there's plenty that we don't, and that's part of the fun of having those conversations. So I like to think when people listen to the shows, they'll recognise and think, oh, I feel the same way as that person, or I don't agree with him, the one who's talking nonsense from Birmingham. But I think that she's right, or he's right, or something like that. You know, that's what I'd like to think people will find in the show.
You listeners out there just don't know how much hot water I just got Dan out of making sure I mentioned, especially the ladies. So, but of course, this is Culture Clash. You can find us on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, visit our Facebook page, Fandom Podcast Network, where we try to keep you updated with all the happenings in fandom. Of course, you can find our show on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. If you are there watching now, thank you so much. If not, make sure you give us a like, you give us a subscribe, and share it out to your friends. If you're listening to the audio version of this, whether it's on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com or any of those major podcast catchers out there, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, so many others. Thank you for listening. Of course, I'm Kyle. You can find me on Twitter, X, whatever it is called these days. I think it's going to change again. I think it might be regenerating more times than the Doctor before it's all said and done.
They're doing it just to confuse you, Kyle. That's what it is.
That's more than likely. But you can find me at @KyleW on that venue, and on Instagram and Threads, you can find me at @KyleFandom. Of course, my co-founder and normal co-host of Culture Clash, Kevin Reitzel, you can find on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Spartan_Phoenix. Dan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules.
Thank you.
Hype up Doctor Who Podcasting Day and get people back into Doctor Who. Let them know what's going on with it. And trust me, the Type 40 show is going to be covering every angle that is coming before we get to these specials. And then when the specials hit, there might be 10 different shows all about each special before it's all said and done.
It's going to be crazy. The next 4.5 months with in the time and space continuum, it's going to be mental, and we'll do our very best to keep track of it all. So come and help us out. Come and join us there at type40.podbean.com or on the Type 40 YouTube channel too, by all means. Thanks, Kyle.
As far as this episode goes, as always, thank you so much for listening. And remember, as we close out, respect each other, enjoy your fandom, and to quote my favorite Doctor, Geronimo!